So, starting a new project, and I did glass with watercolour, or glass or reflections, or reflections. So I've got a collection of glass bits here that if anybody wants to use any of these. So I thought maybe I'll start with just do a very quick drawing demo. So I was thinking something like drawing something like anything that's symmetrical really. I find if I start with a kind of centre line, it just helps me to just keep everything structured. And then I tend to work from the top down. Some people like to work from the bottom, but I find it easier to work from the top. So if I was drawing this bit, for instance, I find it easier if I just draw like a little cross to start with, and I'm thinking perhaps that would be the width. And I can just check that with my pencil that I've got that in the middle. That's pretty good. And then looking from the front of the glass to the back, or front to back, depending on how high up it is, from where I'm standing, I'd say I'm seeing perhaps about something like that as a proportion. You can do this sort of measuring where you literally close one eye and line up the top of the pencil with the back of the glass, and then just adjust your thumb. So that's another way you can work it. I think for the time being this is good enough, just judge it by eye. And then when it comes to drawing this ellipse, I find it easier to start from the kind of tighter radiuses and almost sort of draw it, fairly loosely, fairly lightly to start with. Just try and get as good an ellipse as you can, something like that. And then, if I'm happy with that, I can then hold the pencil a bit closer to and just trace, almost sort of trace around that. And if needs be, move the paper around, because I find that my hand does that easier than it does that.
Yeah.
So if it helps, just trace that around like that. And so complete that. Then kind of working my way down and thinking the bottom about there, but I probably would just work the shape down. Something like that. And again, you could, to get that symmetrical, you could always put a few lines across like that and just measure those across, and almost, if you did them all, you could do something like almost like a dot to dot. So again, it's a good way of just trying to keep everything, I know it sounds a little bit simplistic, but it's quite a good way of keeping everything looking symmetrical. So I've got some there, and then I want to get this one here, this ellipse here. What you should find is that it's a lot rounder here than it is up here. So what happens is, if I'm looking at this, the closer this bit comes to my eye level, the sort of shallower here. So if I was holding it up there, for instance, the top might look a little bit like that, and then if I hold it at eye level, it will just be a straight line across the glass there. But the bottom would still be a little bit curved because that's lower down a bit. So consequently, if you're drawing an ellipse here, and you could just draw it in exactly the same way. If it helps, just construct it. Just make sure that you've got a little bit more that way to that way, if that makes sense. And then it's exactly the same process. You could draw a whole ellipse and then just rub that bit out. Just keep the bit in. So that's just okay. So just a little bit of drawing skills that might be useful. A lot of what I do is painting and drawing from observations, so I'm quite keen that now and then we do a little bit of work from observation rather than just working from paper. So that's a little bit on drawing. Here's a couple of sort of demo ones from earlier in the week, and I did a little bit to that this morning. And again, this is, I'll paint on this in a minute. So using watercolours, what I did last session, I think last session did a bit of watercolours, but it was the coastal scene with waves. And I used masking fluid, which if you wanted to, you could use a bit of masking fluid. And the nice thing about this is I can keep any very bright highlights with this. So it's like a rubber solution. Well, I think it's rubber. I always use like a brush you're not too precious about, because it does tend to wreck the brushes. I find it helps to just dampen the brush first and not kind of fully immerse it. And that way, you're not getting too much on the brush, but it's not going to dry too quickly. So this is great for anywhere where you've got any highlights and you want to reserve any highlights. So there might be a little bit. I've done this already, so there is some on that already. Then you need to let that dry, and then once it's dry, we can then pop a wash on, which is kind of what I did here. So what's going to just I'll use this one because this one is already drawn out. Really, it's mostly sort of what I'm seeing is because it's on a grey surface. I'm just seeing greys. I've got a pear behind there, so there is a little bit of fruit just sort of tucked in there somewhere. And that's sort of in the background there. The main thing about watercolours or painting that area in is just to have plenty of paint mix and have a reasonable sized brush so that you've got loads of paint. I've got some more. This brush is good at just getting a bit more water out, so I've got plenty of mix. What I don't want is to be running out of paint sort of halfway down. So you really can just kind of flood the area. It's quite nice to be able to just try out the colour somewhere else. I think that's going to be right. So I'm just going to quickly kind of flood that in. And where the masking fluid is, that will preserve the white of the paper. So I just want that quite light really. It's not an awful lot of tone there. Put that there. If I'm getting a bead, or it's quite nice to have your paper just at a little bit of an angle. You don't want a very stiff angle like this. Just have a little bit of an angle so that you get this little bead that will just run down. Any excess paint you can just soak up and just use a bit of kitchen roll or something to dry that on. While it's still wet though, there is a few shadows that I could put in there. So I just want a darkish grey. So I've got some black here, but I'm adding some other colours like reds and blues, just to make it a little bit more interesting. And then anywhere where I can see a little bit of shadow, while that's still wet, I can just pop those in. And then that should, if I work quickly, that should give me a fairly soft edge in places. A little bit of shadow, if that's a bit too big, maybe a smaller brush. This has already started to dry, a bit too quick. Yeah, so I just keep it as a paler wash. You can see where it's starting to dry. And then there's a little bit of shadow in this bit here. I'll go to a slightly smaller brush. And, I should have taken the cap off actually, it might have been better, more interesting not to have the cap on. Just make that a little bit darker. think at that point I probably would let it dry and then just put more washes on when it's dry, and then take the masking fluids off. A little bit of shadow there. But one of the features of, if you're painting anything that's shiny or reflective or transparent, you get very quick changes from shadow to light. So that's almost like the key to it, trying to observe the differences in tone, the light bits and the dark bits. I quite often had students sort of asking if there's a particular colour or paint you can use, like silver paint or something. But it's really a matter of just really observing tones, like light and dark transitions. So, and the pair, which I missed, would be somewhere in there. I'll leave that aside. It is really hard. In some ways, it's quite nice just maybe do studies of individual objects to start with, just as a warm up. And then if you're ready, then pop into a still life. Okay. Is that all right? Any questions? Okay.
I think working with glass